Good evening, or good morning, or good day, whatever it is. Hey, pull up a chair and stay. You clicked on this video for a reason. Pelicans Daily presented by Fan Arch. I'm your host, Dylan Bruton. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe. You know the deal, you know the drill. This ain't a fire drill, all right? Y'all know what's going on. I know a lot of y'all probably watching the Game 7 of the NBA Finals right now. It's been very exciting so far. A good old back and forth slugfest. Prayers up for Tyrese Halliburton. Anytime a young star goes out like that, it's always painful, right? No one wants to see that happen. And if you do, you need to check yourself because that ain't right. It might happen to you in far worse conditions and without that type of financial comfort to help you in your rehab process. God don't like ugly. But shout out to Tyrese Halliburton for just being out there in the first place, following Game 6, following all the injuries that he suffered in Game 5, and just being a fighter out there. You know what I'm saying? There's one thing you got to respect is heart. And that's the type of culture that they have built in Indiana. Those guys will run through a wall for the organization, for each other, and you got to salute that. You got to respect that. That's the type of energy that we want to bring to New Orleans. So anyway, though, I know the trade that, we talked about the trade that went around the world. This is the trade that went around the globe, the stratosphere. This is the trade that went around the solar system. Kevin Durant going to the Houston Rockets in exchange for Jalen Green, Dylan Brooks, 5 second-round picks, and the 10th pick this year. Now, hey, that works out greatly for Houston, right? Houston was still able to keep guys like Cam Whitmore, Alperen Sengun, Amin Thompson, Fred VanVleet, Tari Eason, Jabari Smith Jr., and all they had to give up was Jalen Green, which, yeah, you drafted him second overall and expected him to be the guy, to be the franchise face. So, that's got to sting a little bit for their front office that, that he wasn't able to turn into that caliber, even though I still am very high on his potential. He's got to work on his shot selection, though, immensely. But for Dylan Brooks, come on now. Dylan Brooks is a good role player, good, good defensive, I guess 3-and-D. So somewhat, you know what I'm saying? But that's a great trade for the Rockets. They needed that clutch go-to scorer. KD, despite being about to be 37, still averaging 27 on 49% shooting, over 40 from three, 80 plus percent from free throw line. I mean, the numbers he's putting up are ridiculous. Someone should not be that good after an ACL injury, Achilles injury, all that. But that just speaks to how nice of a baller that Kevin Durant is still. Okay, like when people be like, KD's overrated, I'm like, who do you like in basketball? Who do you think is nice? Because I'm not trusting y'all logic and judgment if you thinking K. Now, granted, is KD a floor raiser the way that he was a decade ago? No, I'm not delusional. I'm not living in the past. I'm living in the present. But to sit here and say that KD on a team like the Rockets, who are trending upward, had the 5th-ranked defense in the NBA, just signed their coach, Coach Ime Udoka, who's done a masterful, brilliant, wonderful job of turning the ship around and getting them to where they're at now. If you don't think that now they're not a potential title favorite, you don't know ball. I'm sorry. You just don't know ball. But, does that make it hard for us? Because, they're in our division. Along with the Spurs, along with the Mavericks. Look, this division that we in is not going to be a picnic, all right? The Southwest division is not no picnic. Memphis, you know what I'm saying? They're a wild card because we don't know what's going to happen with Ja. We don't know what's going to happen with Jaren Jackson Jr. So I'm omitting them from this conversation. Chris Lambert did a whole article. Shout out to my guy, Chris. Talking about, what does this mean for us? And he was basically saying, we take the L because San Antonio, they've got a team that is on the verge of being at least at the worst, a play into an eighth seed team, right? Dallas was in the play-in, and Dallas could be more with everybody coming back healthy. And now Houston, the number 2 seed in the entire Western Conference, they just landed a top 5 scorer of all time. So yeah, what are we gonna do? You know what we're gonna do, Chris and everybody else? We're gonna produce. We're gonna go out there and show and prove. This is the time. This is the time when the heat is on and the pressure is at its highest. But you know what the great ones do? They make diamonds. Pressure bust pipes, but it also makes diamonds. This is the time for DeJounte to come back when he's ready. This is the time for, if Herb and Trey Murphy are still there, for them to keep leveling up and improving. This is the time for, if CJ is still there somehow, right, for him to still be a consistent shot maker, for Eve to take another step and leap in his sophomore year. This is time for Jose to keep expanding his game. This is really time for Zion to become a superstar. We know you're a star. It's time for you to become a superstar now. The stakes are at their highest. But I got faith. Why do I have faith? Because we have a great draft ahead of us. And we've got better leadership than years prior. And there's already been a shift. There's already been a change. The fact that we picked up a second first round pick, hey, that's nothing to scoff at. However, I gotta bring it up. And it's quite ironic. And this is from the Bird Rights. Shout out to Mr. David Grubb, who was the previous channel owner of this. You know what I'm saying? Shout out to him especially for, I got to tip my cap extra for building this platform. You know what I'm saying? So just want to give him his flowers. But he did write an article that I had to take into account because it talked about our draft history when we've had multiple first round picks. First, 2006, Hilton Armstrong and Cedric Simmons. Now, I remember Hilton Armstrong on that UConn team with him, Rudy Gay, Marcus Williams, Josh Boone. They all got drafted as like an ensemble, basically. Rudy was really the only one that was seen as a star. I love Marcus Williams' game. As a point guard myself, I thought basically like the kind of career that a Trae Young is having was what Marcus Williams was gonna have. Look, hey man, I was 8, 9 years old back then. I was, hey, hindsight is 20/20. But Hilton Armstrong and Cedric Simmons, and Hilton Armstrong was a great defensive big in the Big East back when Big East ball was at its absolute like apex in the mid 2000s, and Cedric Simmons was a really good big out of the ACC with North Carolina State. Both of them were talented defensive players, but offensive projects. So I'm chalking that up to the management back then not recognizing and understanding that, look, yeah, you got Chris Paul. Yeah, you got David West. Yeah, you were gonna get Peja in a trade. Yeah, eventually you were gonna get Tyson Chandler, and he was going to shed his draft bust label that he had in Chicago and become one of the best rim running big men. But you could have had, now granted, it might have been overkill, but you could have had Rondo, could have had Kyle Lowry, or, and this is an ultimate, like, hindsight is 20/20. It's easy to say now, but you really don't know until you know. You could have had Paul Millsap or PJ Tucker. But that '06 draft is one of the weakest by far. Outside of Brandon Roy, Rondo, and Kyle Lowry, and Paul Millsap, and LaMarcus Aldridge, that draft is like, it's a non-factor. So I hear what Brother Grubb was saying, but I feel like that's an unfair draft to pick from, right? That just was not the draft class to have multiple first round picks in, but it just the luck of the draw. Then 2012. Now this one hurt because me, right? I was 14, right? I was 14 and I thought that, not necessarily saying like play style wise, but I thought the impact that these two was going to have was going to be Shaq and Kobe level. And I'm speaking on Austin Rivers and Anthony Davis. I thought that duo was going to take the league by storm. You couldn't tell me that they weren't. AD had one of the greatest freshman years of college basketball history. One of the most dominant freshmen that I've ever seen in my life. I remember watching Melo. I remember watching KD. I remember watching Mike Beasley. Anthony Davis was on another level. No, of the names I just named, the only one who went to a national championship and won was Melo. And Anthony Davis, he's top 75 Hall of Fame. Like, we're not even going to argue that, right? Yes, he didn't become the number one player in LA that they thought that they were going to get from New Orleans, but we're not going to sit and act like AD's still not that guy. When he comes back in Dallas and they got Cooper and they got Kyrie, watch out. That's going to be a talented team right there. That's going to be a talented team. Austin, that one hurts. Austin Rivers is by far my favorite high school player of all time. Like, I've seen some great high school ball in my days, even in person. I've seen guys in the league right now. But Austin was special. Austin, by far, was my favorite high school hooper of all time. I loved his attitude. I loved his confidence, his shot-making ability. You know, he was like, I'm going to go off. I'm going to go off, and proceeds to go off. Like, yo, I thought dude was going to be, I thought he was going to have a, you know, who's a good comparison? I thought he was going to have like at least a Donovan Mitchell type of impact. But I was thinking like even higher than that. I was thinking like he's going to be, you know, having a Steph Curry type of impact, right? Hindsight 2020. Austin ended up carving out a solid career for himself in LA, in Washington, Denver, Orlando, and he's doing really well for himself as an analyst. I actually really like him as an analyst. I like his podcast. With 2012, it's tough because, again, this was also a draft this was a draft that was top heavy, right? And you did have some good role players sprinkled in, but it was, in my opinion, the 2012 draft is one of the most like frustrating because the guys that were in the first round, there was some guys that I was really thinking were going to be stars. Like I thought Perry Jones was going to be a taller KD. Look, man, I was 14. But to be honest, right? The ceiling that a guy like he had, it was high. It was seen as this is a guy who's going to make that leap once he goes to the pros. And that's like with a lot of that 2012 class, it seemed like they were going to make that leap. Now, I'm glad that I was right on Michael Kidd-Gilchrist. I never saw him as a top 5 pick. I thought of him as like a top 10 lower lottery just because that jump shot, that lack of shot creation. You don't draft someone like that at pick 2. Charlotte, what are y'all doing? Take Bradley Beal. Take Damian Lillard. Take Andre Drummond even. Like, come on now. But they could have had Draymond, Chris Middleton, or Will Barton, who are all in the second round. Now, it's easy to say now, oh, why didn't they pick Draymond? Why didn't they pick Chris Middleton? And they were both great college players. I remember Draymond, you know what I'm saying, when because I do remember like Austin Rivers was projected at first to be the number 1 pick preseason. Him going to Duke, the hype and fanfare. He had the attitude, the pedigree of Doc as his pop, Coach Rivers as his pops. He was seen as a number 1 caliber prospect. Slides to pick 10. AD was always in the top 3 to 5, and his stock rose after the amazing season that he had. But like Draymond was the Big Ten Player of the Year. Was a first or second team All-American at Michigan State. Chris Middleton was All SEC first team. Will Barton was All Conference USA first team out at Memphis. Chris Middleton was at A&M. These guys were all ballers. Like if you watched hoop, you really knew ball. You knew that they were nice. But was there a certainty that they were gonna be like pro, like all-star, like with Draymond and Chris Middleton's case? Was it certain that they were gonna be all-stars? No, it wasn't. And Will Barton was never all-star, but he was a really good spark plug scorer off the bench. So again, Brother Grubb, I hear you. History is not looking too good, but it's easier said than done, right? It's hindsight is 2020. You know what I'm saying? It's easier said than done. Now, 2019, okay. Now this one, yes, we absolutely could sit back and say, no, what's going on? So obviously, Zion, the crown jewel, that was a easy home run out the park. Had one of the greatest freshman years of all time as well at Duke. Was literally a free throw away from winning a national championship. Because you cannot tell me that whether they match up against Virginia or against Texas Tech, that they don't win that in 2019. With that team with RJ, Cam Reddish, Trey Jones, Javin DeLaurier. You can't tell me that they don't win that NCAA tournament. Come on now. But 2019, okay, you got me, cause we picked Jackson Hayes at pick 8. Oh, and to be fair, I actually like this game a lot at Texas, but he was a prime example of like you can't start a player like him right away. He needs to develop. He needs to be able to grow his game, cause right now, no, he ain't there yet. And then Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Now, I don't believe that Nickeil Alexander-Walker was a bust. I think that he was a solid like complementary piece. And granted, he was on he had the he was on that 22 team that went to the playoffs and nearly beat the Suns. And that Suns team was the best team in the West. So I just feel like that one. I'm gonna hold Jackson Hayes. Yes, that one, because we could have had Rui, we could have had Cam Johnson, we could have had Tyler Hero, Ty Jerome, Jordan Poole, Nick Claxton. You could have slotted any of them there instead of Jackson Hayes, and it would have been a good pick. But with Nickeil, it's tough. He was a good college player, but no one expected he was gonna be a star. No one was looking at him and like granted, his cousin Shea, on the other hand. Shea had a lot more potential, but Nickeil, you weren't, looking at his games that he had at VTech and going, that's a star. You're like, that's a good player. That's a player that's versatile, that can do a lot of things, but you're not looking at him as no star. So I hear what Brother Grubb is saying. I do, but this is a new dawn. This is a new age. Pick 7 and pick 23. There's a lot of value to be had. And this is a great draft class. This isn't just a good draft class. It's a great draft class. This is a draft class that is deep and full of a lot of talent. A lot. So let's let President Dumars, let's let Mr. Weaver and anybody else who is in a leadership position, let's let them cook. Before we bring the pitchforks out, before, we light the matches, let's watch them cook. They both have a track record in their respective careers of being able to build competent rosters with strong culture. I believe in them. Now, if they don't, then hey, then you open the conversation of get somebody else. But let history be changed. Let there be an evolution. That's all. I know some of y'all saying, man, you a little too optimistic. I don't know how you couldn't be. Like, we have a talented roster on paper. A lot of teams can't say that. So just imagine when it's maximized properly, everybody is put into their respective spots. The NBA is going to be very wide open this upcoming year because, hey, whether OKC wins or not, we don't know who's going to be that next dynasty team. So there's a lot of room open. Yes, Houston right now, Houston might have lapped into that number 1 spot. Keyword might have. They have to show it when game time comes. Because championships ain't won on paper. Championships are won on the floor, on the court. So we'll see. We'll see. And they did sweep the season series against us. So, I'll concede that, they've got a good roster. Okay, I'm not hating on Houston. I got no beef with Houston, but we ain't Houston, we don't have a problem. I got a lot of love for Houston. In fact, I want to go to Houston one of these days. So stay tuned. But there's still a lot to be encouraged by. And someone we should be encouraged by, but Mojave King. So we picked up Mojave King in that trade with the Pacers where we gave them back their first round pick in 2026 and they gave us the 23rd pick. Now, a little bit about Mojave King, 6'5", 6'8" wingspan, 42-inch vertical, picked 47th by the Lakers in 2023, immediately traded to the Pacers, was on their G League team, showed some promise, but unfortunately wasn't able to hack it, make it on the regular roster. He returned back to New Zealand and Puerto Rico, and that's where he his mom is from originally. And he joined Taronga in New Zealand, and ever since he's been really balling. And so Chris Lambert wrote a really good article, kind of breaking different strengths and weaknesses of his game, breaking down his different ability. And He averaged 19. He's been in these last 5 games. He's averaged 19 a game, 4.6 boards, 4.2 assists. So round that up. That's 19, 5 and 4, and a steal in 5 games. And he had 29 in his debut. Went 3 for 8 from three. And now overall, is he a guy who's a superstar? No, but he's got like solid 3 and D type of potential. He's been compared to guys like KJ Martin, Josh Green, Courtney Alexander. If you really want to go back to the NBA Rolodex, when I saw that comparison, I was like, that's a name I haven't heard in a long, long time. But he played with us very briefly, and Josh Okogie. None of those names scream superstar. When I was watching him, I saw a player that, you know, plays tough defense, is a talented athlete, and is improving as a shot creator. And he's got a nice jump shot. So, off the bench, as we're figuring out who's gonna be there and who isn't, right? There's not as much of like, okay, he's got this big contract to worry about, right? We don't have to worry. We're not under that type of jurisdiction in this situation. So I think it's worthy to give a try. 6'5" with a 42-inch vert. Shoot, man. Hey, there's a lot that can be utilized there. There's definitely a lot. Again, he doesn't scream superstar. You know what I'm saying? But he might end up being a competent role player. You can never go wrong with competent role players. Look at what a guy like Aaron Nesmith has been for the Pacers this playoffs, right? He's been one of their best tough shot makers and 3-point shooters. If Mojave King can have that type of impact, then you know what? That's a trade that's been won. It's a trade that's been won. But on to my new favorite portion, responding to y'all. Hey, well, I just want to say first and foremost, though, thank y'all for the love. Thank y'all for, constantly showing up, giving me feedback, giving me your opinions. Like the interaction makes it all the better. So I just want to say, to both Mr. Hennessy, Rob, and Cole Joker, much love to y'all both. And I'm glad that y'all been appreciating my energy and appreciating my insight. And I appreciate y'all for supporting. I appreciate all y'all, but I just wanted, because I shouted them out last episode. But this one, I want to talk about. There's 2 comments that I want to address. So one, I want to address Mark Semino, who I've talked about before, 41-27, and he said, "Look who's leading their teams in the NBA Finals: SGA and Halliburton. Trey Johnson is the pick." Now, as I talked about last video, there is a strong likelihood that Trey Johnson ends up being the pick. Where he's probably going with that, with the SGA and Halliburton comparison, is like, 6'5", 6'6" players that are versatile, can shoot the ball, can handle. That's what I'm imagining. So, look, I've been on record as saying I would love for us to get Trey Johnson. I think he's got a tremendous amount of talent. I think that he's got the best jump shot in this entire draft. I think he's got beautiful shot mechanics, and I think he's a high-level shot maker. I say the best bucket getters of this class, it's him, it's Dylan Harper, and it's Ace Bailey, by far. As far, again, roll the ball, 5 dribbles or less. Y'all gonna hear me say that a lot, but we had to do that drill. That drill, by the way, is what teaches you how to be a better one-on-one player. So, hey, for anybody who out there hooping, get somebody to guard you, 5 dribbles or less. What can you do with the ball? Because if you can get to the basket in 3 or less, hey, you got it. Because that's like on the pro level, they be doing 3 dribbles or less. But like 5 is like, you coming up as a youngin playing ball. And then another comment that I wanted to address, and I do apologize if I get the name wrong. Exicle? I think it's how you pronounce it. But he said, hard pass on Ace, high ceiling, low floor. Feels like a worse BI, and we've already seen that fit. Would much rather take Trey if he's available at 7. So what I'm hearing is y'all really want Trey, and I'm with it. Trust me, I'm with it. We get Trey, and then at pick 23, we can either pick up a point guard like a guy like Igor Demon if he's still available, or Kasparis, or even Nolan Troyer. Like if we can get one of those international point guards that's a really strong passer, I'm with that. Or get a big, right? Let's say we pick Trey and we get a big Juan uh, Juan Behringer, um, Noah Afange. Like we get a big that can play in the paint, or Thomas Sorber slot. I don't think he's gonna fall that far in the draft, but you know what I'm saying. They're just different examples. Even a guy like Danny Wolf, right? His skill set would mesh well with Eve, him being a floor spacer, ball handler, but can defend at the basket. You put that with Eve, who is not a floor spacer but can defend at the basket. Hey, you get a nice inside outside punch. But with Ace, man, if Ace is available, it's hard not to take an Ace Bailey. That's a player who, of all the players in this draft, in my opinion, I think he's got the most star power. And when I mean star power, I mean like that's a guy that he comes to any team, it's gonna be a movie. You know what I'm saying? It's gonna be, you're gonna want to tune in. You're gonna want to be invested. He's got the personality. He's got the moxie. He's got the name. I mean, the name, like that's like a name that like you coming up with a basketball movie and you're like, I need to come up with that character like in Coach Carter who's like, I'm not the next LeBron James. I'm the only Todd Crane. Like you want that type of character, that like this mythical figure of who they're playing against. Like, oh man, we got a game against so and so, and they're the number one ranked in the state. You come up with a name like Ace Bailey. Now, is that enough to warrant him being drafted at 7? No, it's his game. It's his ability to create off the dribble, to space the floor, to defend, and just overall the 3-level scoring in his game. We saw what BI could do, but to me, Ace Bailey is a better pure athlete. So imagine if BI had a little bit more explosiveness. And I see Ace more as like, I do see the BI comparison, especially when you look at like the Kevin Durant lineage tree that all these guys come from. But I see a lot more Brandon Miller. I'm very high on Brandon Miller with the Hornets. If Ace Bailey can have that type of impact in the league, that's a pick well spent. And especially with us. Like, I think wherever Ace Bailey ends up going, he's going to be a great player. I know people are up in arms, and I get it. I definitely get it. It's a little audacious, but he's going to go high in this draft. Make no mistake. He just might not go to Philly, but if we can get him, especially if we can get him without trading, you don't turn that down. BPA, best player available. That's the motto. So, but I do, nonetheless, though, I do appreciate the insight. I do appreciate the perspective. I'm not discounting it. I'm not ruling it out. Again, I've been very public about Trey Johnson. I've talked about it in multiple videos. So stay tuned for more. This draft is going to be very exciting. I cannot wait when it actually happens. I get to break down my thoughts on, our picks and who we end up getting and what I see for them, moving forth. So that's why you want to make sure that you are subscribed. You want to make sure that you're tapped in, you're liking and you're sharing. The only way that this goes is if it grows. You know what I'm saying? The only way that it evolves is with y'all support. So, nevertheless, it's been amazing as always, chopping it with y'all, doing this, and I appreciate the love and support that y'all been giving me anyway. So, hey, much love to y'all. Have a great rest of your weekend. Enjoy this finals. Spread love. And, get excited for this draft. This is a new dawn. This is a new age. The Pelicans are the old. Nah. We're bringing in a new energy. We're bringing in a new type of timing. And, hey, get on the train now before it leaves the station. You know what I'm saying? So, hey, not much else I could say other than buckle up. Y'all have a good one. Ciao.